Sports cars, Indy cars, stock cars, and off-road racing. You get it all right here on Victory Circle. Hello, everyone. I'm Dave Despain, welcoming you to another trip through the SpeedVision archives. We're going to begin our program with a film produced by Sears that looks at the efforts of two racing teams, very different. One very professional, the other an SCCA amateur team trying to make the grade. The professional team, Penske Racing, and the film focuses on their Can-Am and USAC championship campaigns. But Penske was also competing in stock car, Formula 5000, and endurance racing that year. Imagine running 5 different kinds of cars in a single season. Ambitious and typical of the Penske approach. So you'll get glimpses of all of these forms of motorsport in the film, but what makes this really special is the wonderful footage of the 1973 Can-Am Championship. Can-Am was one of the greatest series of all time, but good footage of the cars and the racing is rare, so this film is a real treat. The car Mark Donohue drove to 6 straight wins in the 73 championship, that was the Porsche 91730, which has been called the greatest racing car ever built. Donohue was as talented an engineer as he was a race driver, and he described the development of that car as the crowning achievement of his racing career. But this film was shot early in the season. In the first 2 races, Donohue struck trouble and could manage only 7th and 2nd place, less than the perfectionist demanded. That explains the serious faces and concerned comments from the driver, and it also provides insight into the single-minded determination and focus of one of the greatest racers of all time.
Let's steer the rack out.
Yeah.
Just turn it so it steers out. I mean, so you get more along at that point of it, right? About an inch. And let's just see if that thing wants to be shorter or longer.
These men are searching. A search most of us make every day. Only here, the ingredients of man, machine, and time must be in perfect balance.
All new mounts and everything, right?
A professional auto racing team. Driver Mark Donohue, engineers, mechanics. The Penske Racing team.
Steer the rack over until everything is kind of
Okay.
Still got the arc on the thing.
One professional team out of hundreds. But only one level of this kind of search. There is another level of the search. Jon Farbman, amateur race driver, and his team. One team out of 1,000.
Doesn't seem to work right.
Yeah.
Hit it. Hit it.
Pull on it.
You think that'll do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Amateur and professional. A counterpoint of search.
You get a rating every weekend. You either know what you're doing or you don't, and you're demonstrating it, generally speaking, in front of anywhere from 20,000 to 300,000, 400,000 people.
The non-drivers, teams of watchers who come week after week to make their own kinds of search. Separate people pulled together out of separate worlds in a mystique of car, track, driver, and crowd. A mystery almost 80 years old. When man found new freedom in machine-powered wheels, the tempo of the search changed to match the rhythm of the new technological age. What began as competition between car and dusty roads soon became something else. In 1911 at Indianapolis, competition and technology found a different pattern for the chase. Began going round and round a paved four-cornered oval. At Daytona and other courses all over the country, men and car raced together toward their own sense of history. It was the only way, they said, for man to search for the spirit of man in a fast-changing technological world. An automobile began to reflect the time in which it was designed and built, to reflect all the scattered differences between certain people who were making this special kind of search. Amateur became professional, began to organize and formalize the means and methods, set up safety standards, turned a pastime into a sport in which the purse for single races climbed to over $1 million. Some of the races flew down straight tracks, called it drag racing, a 440-yard test of heart and muscle. People with wheels, and they went round and round various sized tracks like Indy and super speedways. Or raced on smaller weekend dirt tracks or road courses, going for 2 hours or 24 hours. So each year, thousands of different human beings go on thousands of different searches in front of millions of watchers at 2 different levels, for money or for love, and most often for both.
Sometimes it takes one good lap to make it worth it for that week. You win a race and you're hooked for at least a year.
This is what I've wanted to do all my life. This is what I want to do now.
I get cut, I get burned, I'll come out of the car and I don't even realize it because I have ceased to exist. I'm concentrating so totally that I'm not there.
It was a hobby, and all my friends were racing and I'd be helping them out, and then eventually the sport grew and we all grew with it, which included Mark and Peter Epson and a lot of the people who were racing on an amateur level, and we kind of grew with the sport, and next thing you know, we were being paid for what we were doing for fun.
Well, I of course, raced myself.
Everybody begins as an amateur, even Roger Penske.
I was old enough to have a driver's license and was involved in some drag racing, and then involved in some hill climbs. Then we had a left turn club in Ohio where we'd run on the dirt tracks with MGs and Jaguars and Austin Healeys in between the stock car events. That really was my start, and then went on to driver's school and drove through the SCCA.
But when an ex-amateur like Roger Penske turns professional, his special kind of dedication pulls together some of the finest drivers and technicians in the sport.
The Penske team is like an engine. Everything meshes together perfectly. And then when people wonder why they're winning, it's simply because they don't know just how beautiful a thing it is to watch the Penske crew in action.
Around the clock, this man never, ever slacks off to 99%.
Roger feels that he wants to be involved in many different kinds of racing for a couple of reasons. One, he feels that involvement in one kind of racing, if you learn anything there, it's also applicable to other kinds of racing.
People have asked us, what my impression was of Indianapolis. It's probably the toughest type of racing that you're involved in because you have a track with 4 corners on it and you're looking for tenths of a second in order to get the maximum speed. This year's Indy was a disappointment to us. I felt that it was like a 100-yard dash. You get, runners take their marks, get set, and then they said stop. They did that 3 times to us. And we got caught with Bobby Allison's car with it not starting, and then we washed the cylinder down, and he never got it warmed up. So we made a number of mistakes, which it really hurt us.
Today's top professional teams are a combination of organizational specialists, and the search is implemented with computer programs.
We have about 15 people at the shop, and our capability lies in doing a superior job of development on the cars, and then doing a superior job of preparation for the race itself.
It's a total involvement. You're continuously thinking about it, working upon it in your mind, if not in the shop.
In amateur racing, the search isn't as programmed because the resources to be found are mostly inside oneself.
If I were to spend the money, if I were to have a program, okay, that I would want, I couldn't make that amount of money to do it.
Right, but you can't always get what you want. You settle for what you...
Yeah, well, I've been settling for 7 years.
You're just a kid. You have plenty of time. You can spend all your money and play and race and have a good time.
I am not a kid. I'm a 30-year-old graduate of Cornell University with a degree in astrophysics. I'm a stockbroker. I'm a commodity trader.
You're wonderful.
We have to find somebody who has money who realizes that.
If I found an old man, John...
But we still don't have enough lead time for next year.
Lead time. In the anatomy of auto racing, there is always the need for enough time to find the right combination of man and machine.
Well, racing is something worth doing perfectly. It's unique. Every extra increment of effort is another tenth of a second a lap. It's the search for perfection.
I think all the guys that work here and people involved in racing are more or less artists in their own different kind of way. They all strive for their own different kind of perfection.
What does the upper camber point do with a 30% setup? And if you drop the caster length down again?
I don't know what that would do to the steer.
I don't see how such a small thing can mess us up so bad.
How's it going?
I still haven't... I've just about got the brakes the way I want them. That's what's been causing the problem.
There always comes that moment when all the looking, the building, the quiet searching are over. When it's time to move toward that moment of truth, toward the pressure and suspense of what's waiting when car and driver finally meet track and competition.
This great big truck here, there's two $100,000 cars, and imagine the pressure that is on all of us, myself and the crew, to do well with this tremendous force. It's like trying to, attack Morocco with the United States Army.
On an amateur level, you always seem to be attacking the United States with the Moroccan army.
This car might be worth $4,000, and in order to be professional, you need a car that may be worth $15 to $20 or $30 or $150,000. And I don't have that kind of dough.
If he wanted to climb a mountain, if he really wanted to climb a mountain as bad as he wants to race, then I would say, spend your last dime on all the equipment you need, and then if you don't have enough money, work 2 jobs until you get it.
The history of this car is that we've shown that the car is quicker, at least our combination of car, engine, and team is quicker, but we have failed to win a race yet, and really that's what we're here for, is to win races. That's the only measure of success, so you can't say the car is successful yet. And so the executives at Penske Racing and the executives at Porsche are asking why, with all this money and all this time and effort that's gone into this car, are we not winning?
The machine. Unlike any other sport, the tool also operates at 2 different levels. High cost for professionals, low cost for amateurs. But at both levels, there never seems to be enough money. So all problems really become the same problem. Once car and driver combine to meet the track, they become the ultimate extension of their crew.
Woody, John Woodard, chief mechanic, the hardest working, very intense guy, very uncompromising in his ways, has really tried hard now to build not only this car, but an identical spare car, which is something we've very rarely been able to do in the history of our racing.
It's approximately 1,000 horsepower, and it will do over 220 miles an hour on the straightaway. Between all this chassis and the suspension, everything is made of either aluminum, magnesium, or titanium. A perfect example is the wheel. As you can see, is very light, complete with tire. A front suspension, there's hardly anything to it. This is the oil pressure gauge here, the gear shift lever, and it also has a quick disconnect steering wheel. These are brake fluid reservoir tanks. the brake gas and clutch pedals. Has a Sears Die-Hard battery. And all the engine cooling is done by this fan, which sucks air in from the top and forces it out through the bottom. So what turbocharging is, the exhaust from the motor comes out the bottom of the motor and comes into this half of the turbocharger. And that turns a turbine, which in turn turns this turbine. And this turbine draws air from the outside in this duct and forces it under pressure into the engine. We get the cars complete from Porsche, but we completely go through the cars. Before it gets to the first race, we have at least 1,600 man-hours.
Originally a 1959 Bugeye Sprite, Austin Healey Sprite.
What did it cost?
Originally, I think, with all the options on it, which weren't many, I think $1,900. Original cost, new. Drive it out of your local BMC dealer.
What do you have in it now?
Over the 4 or 5 years, or actually 6 years, it's been raced by 2 owners. I would imagine $10,000.
Counterpoint. Amateur, professional. Always the same tension of things may be left undone. The minutes of practice before a race are a time of mystery. Questions. What could go wrong? Should I give up with this car? Should I go on with the car I have? All the hopes and fears are organized into national associations, amateur and professional. And in the minutes before a race, at any level, you still have to dig around inside yourself.
I bought the car, and, you know, you spend a lot of time on, a lot of money and everything else, and you get kind of attached. Plus, we spent the 4 years sorting it out, and it's finally starting to go and handle pretty decent last year, so we're sticking with it.
You work on it yourself?
Yes, myself and several other faithful friends.
You're trying to do something better than everybody else. You're working with an extension of yourself. It's a machine. So it's a question of it's a physical and mental, and it's a complete involvement.
The physical feel involved with racing is pretty tough to describe. Sometimes a little scary. Sometimes it's you find yourself laughing in the car. I'm sure it's a different experience for everybody that tries it.
When I'm driving, I cease to exist. It's a special thing. It's just speed and motion. No me, no car, just the road and motion.
For me personally, the creativity involved is really much more in the driving than in actually working on the car. In other words, when I'm driving, when I'm really doing it right, it's a beautiful thing.
Whether your goal is 110 miles an hour or 220 miles an hour, the competitive factors finally merge, become the same at both levels.
The biggest thing here is if you know you can beat a guy through the corner, and you catch him like here, you catch him, but you can't pass him. Back off early with him. Stay back 4 or 5 car lengths on him, and right in the middle of the corner, get a run on him. And that's how you pass him going across the short chute. You're actually coming right up on him as you leave the corner, and you
duck down on him.
And once he sees you underneath him, he'll back off early, get into the next corner.
I've never been in a war, but I think that I can imagine the feelings, which is, I guess, the ultimate feelings of aggression. And that when I'm out on the track and there's a car in front of me, my only thought at the time, aside from driving the car, my only thought at the time is making him disappear. And of course, the only way, and it's much more brutal than that when you're in the car, of course, but the only way that you can make him disappear is by passing him. And by passing him without killing him, of course. But the only thing in your mind is getting rid of that guy. Literally getting rid of him, making him disappear.
That Donahue's forced everybody to pick up 3-4 miles an hour.
The job of a racing driver is to drive the car at the car's maximum capability, and hopefully that's not as much as his maximum capability. Studies we've made show that most drivers are not capable of doing that completely, that they do not really use everything the car can do, but the better drivers come closer. Because I've been in the business so long, it's very difficult for me to say, this is what you're doing and this is what you're not doing. You kind of take it for granted.
Of course I
get scared every time he's on the racetrack. My stomach has been about 15,000 knots.
It's just blue. This motor's just blue. I run into the wall now.
Just because there happens to be a little bit of life and death element there, I don't think that makes any difference.
Well, there is a certain amount of danger, but there's a certain amount of danger in anything we do.
Welcome back to Victory Circle, and a correction of the historical record. In this segment, you're going to see a crash at Road Atlanta, 1972, but the driver is not Mark Donohue, as the original narration of the film indicates. The confusion is understandable. Mark had a similar mishap in testing at Road Atlanta, and the knee injuries he sustained forced him to miss most of the 72 season. But the car you'll see flipping, landing upside down, and sliding through the dirt is McLaren driver Denny Hulme. Hulme was knocked unconscious, battered and bruised, but he survived that terrifying wreck and came back to win the Can-Am race at Watkins Glen 2 weeks later. With that, let's go back for more inside looks at Mark Donohue, Roger Penske, and the men of Penske Racing.
In auto racing, accidents aren't so much a way of life. They become a way to learn.
Well, I shouldn't expect a pivot or anything like that.
It may pivot on you at slower speeds.
Yeah.
This is something you'll have to kind of feel as well as bring tire temperature up at the same time.
And I just rotated back.
A way to trade experiences you walk away from, to keep it from happening to someone else.
Did a loop and came down.
You really did a 360.
Did a whole 360 and came down on the nose. Then you can see where the tire mark is, where the front corner hit, and then the rear hit right behind it.
Yeah, you had more tail wing on.
I had less. I had backed the wing off.
But yeah.
We shipped it over, thought they could straighten it, and the factory wide backs at every dimension was distorted, including all the main tubes were broken.
Were you pulling back on the steering wheel?
No, I was pushing forward after the nose came up, you know, just instinctive like my airplane. So the thing rotated up, I was looking straight up at the sky, and I looked back like you're doing a loop in an airplane, you know, see what's happening. I look at the bank back over here.
At the Road Atlanta racecourse in Atlanta, Georgia, Mark Donohue had his first major, serious professional accident.
He was on the back straightaway, and the car got airborne, flipped over a couple of times, and he seriously hurt his leg.
Well, we all recognize that accident happened, and that it can happen again, and that here we are a year later with identical circumstances, two cars, early practice, a car that's looking very good against its competitors. We all realize that those sort of things can happen if we're not careful.
I think he's very professional about what he does. I think he accepts the fact that that can happen, and that's part of any business.
We're being very, very careful now to make sure we don't make any mistakes, that we run the car properly, and that I don't drive it too much or wear it out, or that it's properly put together when we leave for the racetrack, and those sorts of things, which often, not often, but sometimes can be a little bit left to chance.
A policeman can get shot, a fireman can get burned, and a race driver can get hurt, so if you get in a car and you're going to race, that's part of the problem you take on.
Professional, amateur. On race day, all the known and unknown forces of men and machines will come together. And one other, racing luck. The track's weight. Round courses, roads to run, speedways. Clean, quiet, waiting for cars, drivers, crews, fans. And they come by the millions each year to make this the second largest paid attendance sport in the country, to reward the amateur with cheers, to make the top professional drivers the highest paid participants in any sport. Millions of watchers from everywhere, bringing their own private searchers.
I was talking to one of the drivers who said that it's not a matter of being afraid of getting hurt. It's a matter of being afraid that you might not give a good performance, and that's something I like to see, a good performance.
I own a Bugeye myself. In fact, I own several of them, about 5, to my landlady's chagrin.
If you can't sing and you can't dance, go and get you a fast car, come to a drag.
I have sexual fantasies about race cars. I like the loud noises and the fast zooming cars. The men are rather attractive, too.
Hello, Archie. Where are you from?
New Albany, Indiana.
What do you think of the car?
They're great.
Mark Donahue and A.J. Floyd.
Peter Refson. A.J. Floyd.
Mark Donahue.
Joe Leonard. Andretti. A.J. Floyd.
Al Untra, Bobby Untra. I'm for all of them.
Race day, a time to try to end the search. Or maybe a time to begin it all over again.
Gentlemen, start your engine!
We could, I think, all things considered, and we learned something from it. As long, I think, as you learn something from an ordeal or a situation, you're better off for it. Next time we come here, next big race we go to, we'll be better prepared.
We're tickled to death to finish. I believe it took his father 14 years to finish a race here. And, I mean, nobody's happy the way he did finish it, but we got the checkered flag, and that's an accomplishment. Never gone. I think it's over 50 last year.
There's only one winner to each race. And in the long history of auto racing, nobody's ever won them all. But to professionals like Mark Donahue and Roger Penske, who try to win them all, when they don't, it's often because a conspiracy of inanimate objects makes their months of work go down the drain.
Well, evidently, with the car sitting in this heat, the heat expanded the fuel, and it had so much pressure that it was pushing it out around the cap on top of the tank. So it was a matter of changing the cap, and we lost almost 2 laps, and Mark picked back up a lap plus. And really, the funny thing is that he actually ran the total time of the race quicker than George Palmer did.
An amateur, Jon Farbman. His hopes are battered in a tangle on the track, a conspiracy of people.
Most of these guys don't know how to drive. Simple as that. They get all the... You saw, you know, a bunch of jerks. I've been doing this for 7, 8 years, and in these regional races, it never fails to happen. And there was no place to go.
I don't think that you ever get a satisfaction out of this. I think, but it's like having a boyfriend or something that never really will make a commitment to you if you want that commitment, you know. Yeah. And you keep trying, and you get a little bit of satisfaction all along the way, but you keep trying, you know. And it's like the big thrill never really comes.
All the emotions of search, win, lose, joy, despair. The end of one race is the beginning of another. For the amateur, for the professional, the search, like the wheel, must come full circle. It is the anatomy of life and the anatomy of auto racing.
Well, that problem that Road Atlanta that Penske talked about was the last failure for Donahue in the Can-Am that year. Mark romped to victory in the next 6 races to claim his first Can-Am championship. It was a completely devastating performance by Donahue, Penske, and Porsche. Now, we'll change the pace after the break, turning the clock back to 1967. We're going to see how the stars of the Indy 500 fare when they take on the USAC stock car racers. Stay with us.